I want you to imagine that one day, without warning, your favorite game series just disappeared. You still have the memories you made, the laughs, the frustrations, but you can never boot up your old save files again. If your favorite game is an MMO or a live service game of some kind, this is a serious possibility. If the servers are taken down, that's it. One platform I experienced this for myself as a kid was with Roblox. I've been around long enough on the platform to have seen the biggest games rise and fall off the platform. Hell, I've seen Roblox brain rot go from ride a cart into SpongeBob to... But worst of all, I've seen my childhood favorites essentially become lost media. I speak of none other than the Roblox Pokemon games. For whatever reason, just playing the games on my 3DS just wasn't enough for me. I needed my cheap, low-poly, you call that a Squirtle, alternatives. Roblox was a cost-free way for me to play a hell of a lot of Pokemon without the risk of accidentally downloading a virus trying to play a fan game. Not that I do that. The first major Pokemon game on Roblox that maintained its relevance for a very notable period of time was 2011's Pokemon Adventures. Its map is something of a reimagining of Kanto, and they did add quite a lot of Pokemon from Gens 2 through 4, which gives the game a slightly unique flair alongside its somewhat charming models, which are way better than some models we'll get to later.
What is that?
Something very interesting is that the combat in this game is very similar to what Pokemon Legends ZA would go on to have, with a more action RPG battle system where instead of taking turns attacking, moves have a cooldown after being used, as well as a jump button allowing you to attempt to dodge your opponent's attacks, but it's really just guesswork unless you know the actual cooldown timer for a specific move, which if anyone out there really did do that, stop sweating bro, take a shower. The footage you're watching now is my own recording from 10 years ago when I was recording a Let's Play of this game, so this is the authentic experience. Real quick, I just gotta say it, what is that avatar? I immediately changed it for episode 2 and onward to this amalgamation, but why couldn't I cook up one good avatar? Also, shout out this guy rage baiting me in the chat because I really should have been more embarrassed about spamming in the chat during these videos. Nothing gets past this guy. Looking through another person's playthrough of this game, I'm realizing I never really even made it that far in this game at all. I think by the time I found this game, there were just more polished experiences on the site. Regardless though, this was the foundation for Roblox Pokemon games and showed that emulating the feel of the actual games is possible. Why the hell does Officer Jenny heal your Pokemon in this game? Where is Nurse Joy? Pokemon Reborn RPG was released not long after Adventures in 2012, with one core similarity being the combat. It's the same cooldown system as seen in Adventures, but everything else from the starters to the region is all unique. This game is primarily centered around generations 1 and 2, with the Johto starters being the starters of this game, probably to differentiate itself from Adventures. Now, the region itself doesn't look great, or even good, but it's a completely unique layout, and as a kid it felt fun to explore. To tell you the truth, my experience with these elements comes from a different game entirely. One lost to time despite many people searching for it over the years. No one's been able to find anything. See, Pokemon Reborn had a clone, a game that stole their region map and spruced it up, giving it much more detail. The game also used flat images of the Pokemon instead of the original 3D models we've seen in the other games. What you're seeing on screen now is a recreation of what I vaguely remember the game looking like alongside other people's testimony. For specific details, check out the subreddit link in the description, or especially if you remember what this game was actually called or any information that might help the search, drop a comment in the post and help crack this case wide open. Before we move on to the two pinnacles of Roblox's Pokemon achievements, I'd like to brush over a couple of the other games that were somewhat popular on the site that featured other kinds of gameplay styles. The games we've discussed so far are in the minority, games that require a somewhat extensive knowledge of RPG systems and Roblox coding and game development. translating and simplifying complex systems for what was at the time a very limited game development tool. However, there were many other types of games on the site. One simple category we can start with is the games where you don't play as a trainer, but just a straight up Pokemon. Some of these games were pretty fun. My favorite game that I can remember was Pokemon Battle Brawlers, which was a blend of a role-playing server and a battling server. In games of these styles, you'd basically be given a large menu of Pokemon you could transform into. Pokemon Legends was a very similar game that genuinely had some really solid models of some of the Pokemon, but they just gave up with the starters. What the hell is this? Not saying I could do better, but these are the most important ones to get right. The most popular of this style was easily Pokemon Fighters EX, a game I genuinely don't think I've ever played. From what I can tell though, the models are the best original work we've seen from this community. And when you factor in that this game also has Mega Evolution, it's no mystery why this game was so successful. The game was able to live on after the Roblox Pokemon purge by rebranding under the name Monsters of Etheria, and they created their own vast library of creatures to play as instead. Unfortunately, this game is quite inactive these days and appears to be stuck in the shadow of who it used to be. Lastly, I'd like to give a shout out to Pokemon Amber because I don't know where else to fit it. It was basically like a very faithful Pokemon Emerald game, down to the pixelated overworld, but the game never really got updated past the point where you could fight May. It was another game I hardly really remember, but I really liked it. It had a few gyms and these animated grass textures when you'd walk through them, and Fakemon I'm pretty sure, but that's all I can really remember. I don't know if that would help anyone know what I'm talking about, but if you know, let me know in the comments. Moving along to 2013, we saw the release of the biggest game up until this point. The first one I can confidently say if you clicked on this video, then yeah, you probably played it. It's Project Pokemon. This game is essentially plugging Fire Red and Leaf Green into Roblox and sprinkles in Pokemon up until Gen 5 all throughout the region. Add in some sweet monetized gambling, and you've got yourself a hit Roblox game. For real though, while Reborn and especially Adventures had their time in the limelight reaching the front page of Roblox, Project Pokemon was the first to be a consistent hitter, always having an active player base and never leaving the trending tab. Well, maybe not never. One of Project Pokemon's biggest strengths was its consistent updates, like adding Generation 6 and 7. Something Project really expanded on was rare forms of Pokemon. Not only were shiny Pokemon on the table, but an original mechanic called Aura. These were basically just an uncommon version of Pokemon bridging between the regular Pokemon and the shiny Pokemon. Auras started off as just colored reskins for Pokemon, but would gradually add more wacky ones for events and such. This update dropped in 2016, but just a year later, the game's biggest update yet would go live. See, the first few years, this game had this kind of bland but faithful look to what Fire Red and Leaf Green looks like, just from a Roblox game perspective. It looked pretty decent for the time in most areas, though others not so much. However, in 2017, they actually remodeled the starting area up until Mount Moon, and it looks pretty great for Roblox game standards. Later in that year, probably because of a certain competitor just adding the same mode, a randomizer mode and a randomizer Nuzlocke mode were added, instantly giving the game an insane amount of replayability, despite how much it already had. Project Pokemon's legacy is one that could take up a whole video all of its own, so I just wanted to stick with what made it stand out compared to the competition. Plus, I think we've all had some kind of experience with this game anyway. But what success this game did have would be eclipsed by a fresh face releasing to the masses in the year 2015. I can't express how monumental Pokemon Brick Bronze was to me growing up, but I'm gonna try anyway. With Adventures laying the groundwork as the proof of concept, Reborn showcasing the capabilities for a more creative direction, and Project Pokemon having the polish of one of the best put together games on the site at the time, Brick Bronze was the culmination of the past half-decade of inspiration. And the one guy who made that sick hide-and-seek game I played all the time with my sister as a kid is a lead developer? Oh, I knew we were in for peak. Brick Bronze really reaches for the stars with a lot of more moving parts that no other Roblox Pokemon game had achieved. From the 3D Pokemon models that aren't just still images, to small stuff like the NPCs actually moving, to a somewhat ambitious story for a Pokemon game, and even some of the best animated cutscenes in any Roblox game at that time. With its sprawling and unique route design and an abundance of Pokemon, Brick Bronze sold its players on not just a great Roblox game, but a damn good Pokemon game. Sun and Moon were games that were being worked on at the same time as Brick Bronze, and I gotta tell ya, I would take Brick Bronze over Sun and Moon any day of the week. The game's combat is your typical turn-based combat for the series with the added Mega Evolution mechanic from X and Y. Later on they even added Z moves, but I never actually used them, I was too in love with Mega Evolution. Something no other Roblox game dared to try was to actually give each gym its own puzzle, like most of the main series games actually do. Some, like the Second City's gym, just straight up take advantage of being a Roblox game and have you complete a mini obby to reach the gym leader. Basically all the rest are unique puzzles though, nothing crazy but still very cool. Growing up I basically found the beginning of the game to just be so fun, I would just replay it over and over again building different team combinations and such. But that is not to discount the later areas either because they just get even better. I've always loved the ambiance of the second gym city, Brimber, which lies next to an active volcano. Floruma City reminds me a lot of what would become Balinleia City in Sword and Shield, a brilliant and gorgeous concept for a city. Crescent City is an inspired haunted port. Iridia is probably my favorite take I've seen on a desert Pokemon town. I could go on, but there's one location that deserves its own in-depth look. Around halfway through the game, you make it to Anthean City, which acts as the signature giant city most Pokemon games have their own version of. And of course, it's a floating island for extra style points. You could buy a hoverboard to increase your movement speed, design your own apartment, buy Mega Stones, and of course, try your hand at the lottery. You get one free chance a day to get a prize ranging from a legendary Megastone to some sweet, sweet cash. If you're a gambling man, you can throw Robux at it for extra attempts. But really, this whole game is just a delight. Unfortunately, when the game was gearing up to be finished with really just the Pokemon League left, Nintendo had made their move. On April 18th, 2018, the beginning of the Roblox Pokemon Purge had begun with the deletion of Pokemon Brick Bronze and warnings sent to the creators of the game that they must cease all development of the game or face account deletion and legal consequences. The game page was switched to a held for review page and removed the game's thumbnails and badges from everyone's inventories. The rest of the games would be taken down in some form or another later in the year on August 5th. It was only a few years prior that Nintendo had really started going after fan games, with two of the most infamous instances being Pokemon Uranium and another Metroid 2 remake, both taken down in 2016. Nintendo has every right to take down any game using their properties without their permission, I understand that, especially in the case of these Roblox games that are making a profit off of intellectual property they do not even own. Just look at systems like Project Pokemon's Roulette. Let's not act like Nintendo's a small indie company in need of every dime to survive. Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe released 1 year prior to the Purge. The Wii U generation was rough for them, sure, but by 2018, they were fine. The Brick Bronze team wasn't through just yet though, as they decided to use their available resources to transform what Brick Bronze was into an original experience with its own battle mechanics and creatures to catch. The project would be titled Loomian Legacy and released alongside the first version of the game on July 20th, 2019. At this current moment, the game has a total of 300 Loomian creatures you can catch, which is a very impressive number, considering that these are all original designs and creations. The beginning of the game is staunchly similar to Brick Bronze, basically up until the first gym, which uses updated versions of the same towns. Which makes sense with how quickly they were able to release this version of the game. They also feature character models that look like this for some reason. Yeah, this might just be me, but I've always found the more human-like avatars that they started ramping up on the platform towards the end of my time on the site to be so much less charming than my stupid little blocky people.
So cute!
It doesn't really matter too much, it just kinda bothered me being the only blocky person in this world. Something else that I never really threw down to was this game's battle system. I respect that it was trying something unique by making you play around with your energy bar and trying to reserve it, but for whatever reason it just didn't resonate with me. Middle school me just wanted to play Pokemon, but this just limited my gameplay options. In retrospect, I think I would enjoy the mechanic now a lot more if I gave the game another try, but I think I'm past the point of caring for this game in all honesty. Looking back though, I didn't give these new locations the credit they deserve. The second town in particular looks sick with its Japanese-influenced architecture. In the end though, between the slow rollouts of content and general lack of interest in the game, and even after giving the game one last shot with the third gym, I dropped it and never looked back, only occasionally pondering if the game is still active. It appears my criticisms at the time have unfortunately aged worse as content rollout slowed down to a halt, with only 4 badges in the game despite 7 years of development. At the very least, the game is still being worked on with events still going on, so hopefully fans can receive a plethora of content soon. While we may never be able to boot up our original save files again, not all hope is lost. In 2017, there was a massive Roblox leak in which countless game files got leaked, which obviously is terrible for the developers, but at least a little bit of good was able to come from that. Fast forward a year after the Roblox Pokemon purge, an unbreakable resistance was formed. Over the years, dozens of groups have taken it upon themselves to preserve these experiences as best as they can, and in some cases, adding content, all the while preserving player data and fending off against takedowns. Certain Brick Bronze Reuploads have even added a Pokemon League allowing you to finish the quest you never could. Project Pokemon developers have been adding other regions to explore. But even with the additions, the developers make sure the games feel as authentic and close to the originals as possible. I'm not gonna snitch and say the names of these groups just in case, but you have the internet, you can figure it out really easily. The days of new exciting Pokemon games on the platform are over, and that's okay. Pixelmon and Cobblemon are still going strong as Minecraft mods, ROM hacks are at an all-time high relevancy in the Pokemon community, and while fan games aren't as prominent as they used to be, you can still find them out there. And that's just the unofficial stuff. The Pokemon franchise is still pumping out shit on the regular, sometimes literally.
What the fuck?
Roblox Pokemon was a part of my childhood I'll always cherish, and as much as it felt like the end of the world at the time, I've moved on to bigger and better things. When Brick Bronze was suddenly pulled from us, I basically stopped playing Roblox entirely. I checked back in when Loomian Legacy dropped, didn't really enjoy that, then didn't touch the site until COVID hit, and I would occasionally play games like Arsenal and Tower Defense Simulator. I didn't know what Bloons was, okay? But after this short period, I've basically left the site entirely. Roblox is doing better than ever, thanks to Slop, but I've also just aged out of Roblox, and that's okay too. As a final reminder, if you remember anything about that Pokemon Reborn ripoff, head to that first link in the description and type whatever information you have for me. I'm losing my brain!